One of the things I go into about understanding about how Iran decides to use force in different conflicts is discerning the difference between conflicts of opportunity versus conflicts of necessity. And wars, if you understand why Iran's going to go to war, or why Iran's going to throw billions of dollars or millions of dollars at something, you have to understand its calculus, and a big part of that is how much does it matter to Iran? Syria and Iraq matter an awful lot to Iran, and whereas Yemen and Bahrain matter quite a bit to Iran, but don't matter in quite the same way. Whereas Yemen and Bahrain matter an awful lot to our partners in the Gulf Cooperation Council and the GCC, and particularly to Saudi Arabia. And so even though Iran has certain strategic interest in both those areas, they have ideological interest in those areas. They obviously have certain religious interests with the Shia populations in those areas that they want to kind of outreach to and build relationships with and influence, kind of missionary work as I call it. But fundamentally, it doesn't drive their behavior like the existential need that they have to preserve things like Lebanese Hezbollah and Lebanon, and their relationship with Assad, and their need to protect their interests and investments that they have in Iraq. So their investments in Yemen and in Bahrain are cost imposing on the Saudis, in that the Saudis have to, from their perspective, the Saudis feel like they have to respond in those situations. And the Iranians only need to invest a little bit in those places to drive very significant reactions from the Saudis and to a lesser degree the Emiratis and other players. Whereas, when we're looking at how to respond, and this kind of drives those larger questions that I know Secretary Mattis and others in the administration struggle with, and how to prioritize our responses. Whereas in Iraq and Syria, those are things that are existential to Iran. Where for example, if we're looking just purely from the Iranian strategy perspective, we could, for example, do cost-imposing strategies on Iran there, because those areas are obviously very important to us, but they're much more important to Iran than they are to us. Whereas Yemen and Bahrain are much more, important to Saudi Arabia, and I worry that Iran is doing cost-imposing strategies on Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and other countries there, and potentially on us, as well as we become involved, so that we have to be careful in how we approach those issues. So I think that this is one of the things that I do worry about, and why it's so important to understand how Iran approaches issues like Yemen, vice issues like Syria.